The autumn wind carried the scent of wet concrete and steel across the construction site. Samuel stood at the edge of the massive bridge project, his calloused hands gripping the safety railing as he watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of amber and gold. At 42, he had earned every gray hair at his temples along with his reputation as the most reliable structural engineer in the state. Mr. Stews called Macon, his construction supervisor, approaching at a brisk pace with a tablet in hand. The final safety inspections are complete. Everything exceeds specifications by at least 15%. Samuel nodded, taking the tablet to review the figures. Good work, Mac. That's why we pull double shifts. Excellence isn't achieved by cutting corners. Mac hesitated before speaking again. Sir, some of the team were wondering if you'd join us for a drink tonight. It's becoming a bit of a tradition, you know. I can't tonight, Samuel replied, handing the tablet back. I need to review the contractor proposals for the support structure. The $50 million contract we secured comes with responsibilities. Your wife must be a saint for putting up with these hours, Mac said, shaking his head. Samuel's expression remained neutral. Vivian understands what it takes to build a legacy. He didn't mention the growing distance between them or how her understanding seemed to correlate with his increasing income. As he walked to his truck, Samuel checked his phone, 3 missed calls from Howie. His younger brother had been unusually persistent lately, leaving cryptic voicemails about needing to discuss something important regarding Vivian. Samuel deleted the notifications. Howard had always been prone to dramatics, especially when he needed money. The drive home took him past the newly developed luxury shopping district. A familiar car caught his eye, a red Mercedes, Vivian's anniversary gift from him on their 15th year together. He glanced at his watch. 7:30 p.m. Her yoga class with Celeste should have ended an hour ago. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the driveway, the security lights illuminating their colonial-style home. Inside, he found Derek sprawled on the living room sofa, his attention completely absorbed by his phone. Hey, son, Samuel said, setting down his briefcase. Derek barely glanced up. Hey. Samuel noticed 3 shopping bags from high-end boutiques stacked by the stairs, their logos matching the stores he had just driven past. Is your mother home? Nope, still at yoga with Celeste, Derek muttered, his thumbs flying across his phone screen. She said she'd be back late. Samuel loosened his tie, studying his son's face for any sign of awareness or concern. Finding none, he headed to his home office, his sanctuary. The walls were lined with engineering awards and family photos. He paused in front of one taken 5 years ago in Maui. Vivian's smile looked genuine back then. His phone vibrated. Howard again, Samuel answered, his voice edged with years of handling his brother's crises. What is it, Howie? It's about Vivian, Howard said urgently. I've been trying to reach you, unless the house is on fire, it can wait until morning, Samuel interrupted. I have proposals to review. Good night, Howard. He ended the call and buried himself in work, losing track of time in calculations and safety margins until the garage door opened at 10:45 p.m. Footsteps echoed through the house, accompanied by the rustling of shopping bags. Vivian appeared in the doorway of his office, looking effortlessly put together despite her supposed workout. Her stylish athletic wear was flawless, without a trace of sweat. Working late again? She asked, leaning against the doorframe. You know what they say about all work and no play. Samuel looked up, meeting her gaze. Someone has to pay for those shopping bags. A flicker of something, guilt, defiance, crossed her face before she smiled. Just indulging a little. You always say I should enjoy the fruits of your labor. That I do, he muttered, returning to his work. There's leftover lasagna in the fridge if you're hungry after all that work. Oh, Celeste and I grabbed a bite after class, she said casually, pushing off the doorframe. Don't stay up too late, darling. Samuel waited until her footsteps faded before opening his laptop. He typed Celeste Yoga Instructor followed by their zip code. Nothing. He tried variations of the search, but there was no match for Vivian's supposed new friend. The next morning, Samuel arrived at the office early. The project headquarters occupied the top floor of a downtown skyscraper, offering a clear view of the bridge site in the distance. His assistant, Maria, intercepted him with coffee and updates. "There's something odd," she said, handing him a report. "Someone tried to access your email from an unauthorized device yesterday." Samuel examined the report. "Did they get in?" "No, our security blocked it. They traced the IP back to a local business, Jacobs Properties." Samuel kept his expression neutral as he memorized the address. "Probably just spam bots." "Update our filters," he instructed. The morning passed in a whirlwind of meetings and site inspections. During lunch, Samuel walked past a sleek office building with floor-to-ceiling windows. Through the glass, he spotted a sharply dressed man showing a property listing to a couple. His smile was too white, too practiced. His phone vibrated with a message from Jason, "This isn't fair to you. We need to talk about what Vivian is doing." Samuel muted the conversation. That night, he worked later than usual, calling Vivian to let her know he'd be home after 9. But at 8, he parked his truck a block away and walked toward his house in the growing darkness. As he approached, he noticed an unfamiliar car parked on the street, a black BMW with dealership plates. The house was mostly dark, except for the glow from the master bedroom window. Samuel moved around to the back, where the patio doors provided a clear view of the kitchen. Inside, Derek sat at the island, wearing headphones and arguing with someone on the phone. "Dude, my mom is really bold," Derek said, laughing. "Having him over while Dad's at work?" He paused, listening. "The fool works double shifts to give us a good life while Mom spends wild nights with her friends." A chill ran through Samuel, but his mind stayed sharp. He pulled out his phone and recorded the conversation, his hands steady. His phone vibrated again, another message from Jason, "I can't keep this secret any longer. Vivian is selling the house behind your back." Samuel turned and walked back to his truck, driving to a nearby park before making a call. "Julie bro," he said when she picked up. "Samuel. What can I do for you? I need your services. This time, it's personal." "Of course," she replied professionally. "Who's the target?" "My wife. And a real estate agent named Jacobson." "I'll have an initial report in 48 hours, Julie said. "Standard rates. Money's not an issue." Samuel ended the call and drove home at 10. The house was quiet. Derek's door was shut, music pulsing behind it. The master bedroom smelled of an unfamiliar cologne, poorly masked by cleaning products. Vivian was in the en-suite bathroom, the shower running. Samuel changed into his sleepwear, noticing that Vivian's side of the bed was slightly rumpled. On her nightstand, his phone vibrated, another message, "Incredible as always. Can't wait until next time." Samuel didn't react. He didn't confront. Instead, he opened his laptop and began documenting everything, dates, times, observations. In his profession, details made the difference between structural integrity and catastrophic failure. The shower stopped. Moments later, Vivian emerged in silk pajamas, her hair wrapped in a towel. "You're home late," she said, slipping into bed. "Big project?" Samuel kept his tone even. "How was yoga?" "Oh, wonderful," she said. "Celeste is really helping me improve my form." Samuel nodded, making another mental note. Every lie was another crack in the foundation of their marriage. But unlike his bridges, he wouldn't repair this structure. He would demolish it. Samuel stuck to his routine, kissed Vivian goodbye, nodded to Derek, and drove to work. But instead of heading to the site, he went to his attorney. I need everything documented, he told Marcus Chan, sharing his recordings and notes. But I also need to understand what I'm dealing with before I make a move. Marcus reviewed the evidence. Smart. Most people confront right away and lose their advantage. He looked up. What's your next step? Wait for my investigator's report. Then I'll decide. Samuel stood to leave. One more thing, prepare the divorce papers discreetly. But don't file them yet. Marcus nodded. You're handling this well. Samuel paused at the door. Engineering taught me something valuable, Marcus. When you discover a structural weakness, you don't evacuate the building immediately. You study the problem, develop a plan, and then execute it with precision. Samuel spent the rest of the day at the bridge site, reviewing safety protocols and inspecting structures. Work was his anchor, the one thing he could trust completely. Numbers didn't lie. Steel didn't betray. That evening, Howard called again. Sam, please, his brother pleaded. You need to know what's happening. Is Vivian finally going to be honest, or are you just playing your part? Samuel asked, his voice controlled. A sharp intake of breath on the other end told him everything. How did you know? Howard whispered. Goodbye, Howard. Samuel hung up, adding another piece to the puzzle. That night, in his home office, Samuel reviewed Julie Bro's preliminary report. Her reputation for discretion made her the perfect choice for this situation. Julie's findings confirmed Samuel's suspicions, and revealed much more. Your wife doesn't just have a lover, Julie said, spreading photographs across the desk. She's part of something bigger. Look at this beach house. She pointed to an aerial shot of a luxurious oceanfront property. Officially valued at $2.3 million. Sold last month for $1.1 million. Guess who facilitated the sale? Andre Jacobson, Samuel answered, studying the document trail. And guess who's been spotted there every Tuesday and Thursday? Julie slid another photo forward, Vivian's red Mercedes parked in the driveway. Who owns it? Samuel asked. On paper. A shell corporation. But the purchase was made with funds traced back to your old friend, Rich O'Brien. Samuel's jaw tightened. Rich had been his best friend for 20 years. Their families vacationed together, their kids grew up side by side. Show me everything. Julie laid out more files. Rich isn't just covering for Vivian, he's helping Andre launder money through undervalued real estate deals. They buy high-end properties, artificially deflate the value, sell them below market price, and pocket the difference through offshore accounts. Samuel clenched his fists. And my brother? Involved, but on a small scale compared to the others. He thinks he's just helping orchestrate a divorce setup. He has no idea he's part of a money laundering operation. Samuel absorbed the information, his mind already formulating a plan. Keep digging. I want every name, every property, every dollar. There's more, Julie hesitated. Your wife has been pushing to sell your house, right? She mentioned wanting something more modern last week. It's part of their plan. They're planning to undervalue your property by at least 30%. Andre already has a buyer lined up, another shell company. Samuel's phone vibrated. A message from Vivian, honey, I've been thinking about our conversation. I found a great real estate agent who could help us look for a new home. His name is Andre Jacobson. Perfect timing, Samuel murmured, showing Julie the message. What are you going to do? She asked. Play along. Samuel replied to Vivian's message, sounds great. Set up a meeting. After Julie left, Samuel called his project director. Mac, remember those stress tests we ran on the bridge's support columns? Yeah, what about them? I need something similar, for a personal matter. What kind of stress test? The kind where we push until they break. But first, I need to know exactly how much pressure they can take. Samuel agreed to meet Andre Jacobson at his office. The real estate agent exuded artificial charm, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Mr. Stews," Andre said, standing to shake his hand. "Your wife has spoken very highly of you." "Really?" Samuel's handshake was firm, professional. "Funny. She never mentioned you until recently." Andre's smile wavered. "Well, I specialize in discreet transactions. Some of my clients prefer privacy. Like the beach house in Ocean Rave, an almost imperceptible pause. I'm not familiar with that property," Samuel said. "Though my friend Rich O'Brien might be able to refresh my memory." Andre's polished facade cracked slightly. "Maybe we should focus on your house. Vivian mentioned you're interested in something more contemporary." "Actually," Samuel leaned forward, his voice low, "I'm interested in a lot of things. Property valuations. Market manipulation. Money laundering." Andre's face drained of color. "I think there's a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." Samuel stood. "Just a miscalculation on your part." He walked to the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Andre. Tell my wife I'm looking forward to our dinner this weekend, the one where you'll be discussing the potential value of our properties." Another report from Julie arrived. The corruption ran deeper than they had imagined. Andre wasn't just running local scams, he was under federal investigation for a massive real estate fraud scheme spanning 3 states. Samuel's phone rang. "Did you meet with Andre?" Howard's voice was anxious, uneasy. "Just left his office." "Interesting guy," Samuel said casually. "You've worked with him before, right?" "I might have done some consulting." "Must be lucrative." "That new boat of yours looks expensive." "Sam, listen, save it for dinner," Samuel interrupted. "You're coming, right? Andre will be discussing the sale of our house." A long pause. "I'll be there." The next few days, Samuel gathered more evidence. Julie's investigations uncovered more key players, local judges expediting property transfers, bank managers overlooking suspicious transactions. At the center of it all, Andre orchestrating everything with calculated precision. Dinner was set for Saturday night. Vivian had invited Andre, Howard, and Rich, along with several other couples, unwitting witnesses to what was about to unfold. "Darling," Vivian called from the bedroom as she got dressed. "Are you sure you're comfortable with Andre handling the sale? He did mention his commission is a little higher than standard." Samuel adjusted his tie in the mirror. "I trust your judgment, darling. After all, both Howard and Rich highly recommend him." She appeared behind him, elegant in a black dress that likely cost more than most people's monthly salary. "That's right. In fact, Rich was just telling me about a beautiful beach house Andre helped him acquire, Ocean Drive, I think." In the mirror's reflection, Vivian paled slightly. "I wouldn't know anything about that." Samuel turned to face her. "Interesting. Your car seems to know the route well enough." Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Their guests had arrived. The evening unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Andre dominated the living room conversation, charming the guests with discussions about real estate values and market trends. Howard lingered nervously at the edges, while Rich tried too hard to appear natural. During dinner, Samuel stood to make a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass, "and to true friends, those who always have your best interests at heart." His gaze settled on each of them in turn, Vivian, Andre, Howard, Rich. None could hold his eyes for long. After dessert, Samuel suggested that the men retire to his study for a brandy. Once the door shut, he activated a recording device in his pocket. "Gentlemen," he began. "Let's talk about real estate, specifically, how to manipulate it for personal gain." Andre's smile stiffened. "I'm not sure what you're implying." No implications, Andre. Just facts. Samuel opened his laptop and turned the screen toward them. Like the fact that you're under federal investigation for fraud. Or that my brother here has been taking bribes to refer desperate divorcing couples. Or that Rich has been helping you launder money through undervalued property sales. The blood drained from their faces. You're bluffing, Andre said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Samuel pressed play on a recording, Derek's phone call about his mother's affairs, followed by snippets of Howard's conversations with Andre about the divorce scheme. Jesus, Sam, Howard whispered. I can explain, there's no need. Samuel's voice was cold. The FBI will handle the explanations. Unless what? Rich asked, sweat beading on his forehead. Unless you start talking. Now. Every detail about Andre's operation, every property, every deal, every person involved. You're making a mistake, Andre said, straightening his jacket. You have no idea who you're dealing with. No, Andre. Samuel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I build bridges for a living. I understand structural integrity. And right now, your entire operation is on the verge of collapse. The study door opened. Is everything all right in here? Vivian asked, stepping inside. We heard raised voices. She stopped, taking in the scene, Andre, rigid. Howard, pale. Rich, uneasy. Perfect timing, darling, Samuel said. We were just discussing real estate fraud and money laundering. You know, those Tuesday and Thursday meetings at the beach house. Vivian's composure cracked. You don't understand, I understand perfectly. Samuel turned back to the men. You have 24 hours. Either you help bring down the bigger players, or you go down with them. You're insane, Andre growled. We'll destroy you. Samuel chuckled. With what? The recordings Vivian's been making of our conversations. The ones she planned to use as evidence of emotional abuse. He held up his phone. Next time, don't sync your devices with our home cloud. The dinner ended abruptly, their guests fleeing into the night. Samuel watched from his study window as the last car drove away. His phone vibrated, Julie's message, contact confirmed. They want to meet tomorrow, Samuel smiled. The foundation was set. Now it was time to build something new, something that would last long after the dust settled. He turned to find Vivian standing in the doorway, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. How long have you known? She asked. Long enough to understand that our marriage isn't the only thing you were willing to sacrifice. He walked past her toward their bedroom. Pack what you need for a few days, he said. When the FBI starts making arrests, I'd rather not have to explain why my wife is still living here. You'd really do this? After 18 years? Samuel paused. Do you know what separates a good engineer from a great one, Vivian? She said nothing. A great one knows that sometimes, the most important thing isn't building something to last. He met her gaze. It's knowing exactly where to place the demolition charges when it's time to bring it all down. He left her there, her perfect world crumbling like a house of cards in a storm. Tomorrow, he would meet with the FBI, tomorrow, he would start dismantling everything Andre and his accomplices had built. But tonight, he would sleep soundly, knowing that the fools weren't the ones working double shifts. The fools were the ones who thought they could deceive a man who understood that no structure, no matter how carefully built, was without its breaking point. And Samuel Stews had found theirs. The sky was clear and cold when Samuel arrived at his office at 6 a.m., reviewing the final pieces of his plan. At exactly 9 a.m., FBI agents would raid Andre's office. Vivian, meanwhile, would be at her so-called yoga class, which was really her usual meeting with Andre at the beach house. Everything is set, Agent Sarah Martinez confirmed over a secure line. Teams are stationed at all target locations. Good, Samuel checked his watch. Remember, Judge Jennifer Brunnen needs to be handled separately. She'll try to interfere the moment she hears about the raids. Already covered. We have a team at the courthouse with a warrant for her records. Once we move on Andre, he won't have time to destroy evidence. Samuel opened his laptop, connecting to his legal team's secure server. The emergency motions were ready, prepared for filing in a different district, far from Brunnen's influence. His phone vibrated. A text from Vivian, heading to yoga. Don't wait for me for dinner, working late with Celeste on a new routine. Samuel allowed himself a small smile. The timing couldn't have been better. At 8:55 a.m., he called his CFO. Remember those documents we discussed? Process the bonus transfer now. You sure, Sam? It's unusual to release project bonuses this early. The documentation citing personal matters is in order. Trust me. By noon, you'll understand. At 9 a.m. sharp, Samuel watched the security feed. Julie had arranged a vantage point from the building across the street. FBI agents stormed Andre's office with precise, coordinated movements. On another screen, similar operations unfolded at the Beach House and the Browning Courthouse. His phone exploded with notifications. Howard, what the hell is happening? FBI is at Andre's office. Rich, they're saying something about a fraud investigation. Call me. Vivian, why are there federal agents here? Samuel ignored them all, focusing instead on his computer screen as his lawyers filed the emergency motions. At 10 a.m., they secured orders freezing all related assets, including those hidden in shell corporations. At 10:30 a.m., his real estate agent, a legitimate one, called. Mr. Stews, the offer has been accepted. Buyers are ready to close today. Perfect. Process everything immediately. By 11 a.m. Samuel had transferred every joint account into his name, securing the funds before Vivian or her accomplices could access them. Derek's college fund was moved into an irrevocable trust with strict conditions: maintain a 3.5 GPA, attend therapy, work part-time. Vivian was the first to arrive at his office. Her yoga outfit was pristine despite her supposed intense workouts. Andre followed closely, his usual composure replaced by barely contained rage. What have you done? Vivian demanded, storming into the office. Samuel looked up calmly. Interesting yoga class. The Beach House has quite a view. You arrogant, Andre stepped forward. You have no idea what you've started. I have judges in my pocket, like Jennifer Brunnen. She's a little busy with federal agents at the moment, Samuel interrupted. The color drained from their faces. You can't prove anything, Vivian recovered first. I have recordings of your emotional abuse, your controlling behavior. You mean these recordings? Samuel pressed play on his computer. Vivian's voice filled the room, coaching Andre on how to edit their conversations to make him sound worse. Next time, don't sync your phone to our home cloud. The door burst open. Howard and Rich rushed in, looking desperate. Sam, please, Howard pleaded. Whatever you think is happening, it's happening, Samuel said coldly. At that moment, Agent Martinez entered with two other FBI agents. Mr. Jacobson, we have a warrant for your arrest. Charges include money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy. You're making a mistake, Andre straightened his jacket. My lawyers will, your lawyers will be busy defending themselves, Samuel cut in. The FBI is particularly interested in how you helped Judge Brunnen fast-track property transfers. Rich collapsed into a chair. Oh, God. The IRS is also taking a closer look at everything, Agent Martinez added. Mr. O'Brien, Mr. Stews, Howard, you might want to call your attorneys as well. Money laundering carries significant prison time. The commotion drew Derek to the doorway. He froze, his face paling at the sight of his mother standing beside Andre, federal agents reading rights, his uncle and Rich looking devastated. "Dad?" His voice cracked. "What's going on?" Samuel met his son's gaze with steady resolve. "Actions have consequences," he replied. "Remember those jokes about your mother's affairs? About your fool of a father working double shifts? Turns out, I wasn't the fool. Derek's carefully curated social life shattered when the parents of his friends learned about his role in covering up his mother's infidelities. The recordings of his cruel jokes spread through his social circles, leaving him isolated and ashamed. Vivian made one last desperate attempt. "I'll take everything in the divorce, the house, the accounts." "Already sold, legally and above market value," Samuel interrupted. "As for the accounts, they're secured. Derek's college fund is in a trust. Maybe you should focus on finding a good criminal defense attorney." Andre finally pieced it together. "You orchestrated all of this." "No, Andre. You did this to yourselves. I just understood the structural weaknesses in your plan. Like that bridge I'm building, it's all about knowing where the pressure points are." One by one, FBI agents escorted Andre, then Rich, then Howard out of the office in handcuffs. Vivian remained behind, her once perfect world reduced to rubble. 18 years, she whispered. Wasted. Why? Revenge? Justice, Samuel corrected. The FBI estimates that your boyfriend's scheme ruined dozens of families. Consider yourself lucky that you're only facing fraud charges. Judge Jennifer Brunen's downfall was spectacular. Stripped of her position and sentenced on federal corruption charges, she became a cautionary tale, her case studied in law schools across the country. Samuel's reputation, however, soared. The FBI investigation exposed the full scale of Andre's operation. The evidence Samuel provided helped recover much of the stolen money, earning him both immunity and respect. Derek sat in the living room of Samuel's new home, a modest yet elegant house, bought with his project bonus. "I'm sorry, Dad," Derek said, his voice heavy with shame. "I was stupid and cruel." "Yes, you were," Samuel said firmly. "Your trust fund now has conditions: maintain a 3.5 GPA, attend therapy, and work part-time. Show me you understand the value of honest work." "And Mom?" Derek asked. "That's her path now. Focus on yours." The criminal trials made national news. Vivian, Andre, Howard, and Rich all faced federal charges. Judge Jennifer Brunen was disbarred. The man they had dismissed as a workaholic fool had dismantled their entire operation with the same precision he used to build his bridges. Samuel stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for his completed bridge project. The mayor praised his design, its strength, its integrity. But Samuel knew the real achievement wasn't in the steel and concrete spanning the river. It was in the lessons learned. Patience outweighs passion. Real strength lies in understanding structural weaknesses. Some things must be torn down before something better can be built. And most of all, the fool isn't the one working double shifts to build something lasting. The fools are the ones who mistake dedication for weakness, integrity for naivety. They never understood that Samuel Stews didn't just build bridges. The visitation room at the state penitentiary was cold and sterile. Vivian Stews, now inmate 24700-81A3, sat in her orange jumpsuit. 5 years had stripped away her designer clothes, her polished appearance, and her air of superiority. Her once perfect hair was streaked with gray. Her once flawless face bore the lines of consequence. "Conjugal visits are on Thursdays," a guard joked as he led Samuel into the visitation booth. "Just finishing some paperwork," Samuel replied, his tone purely professional. The guard nodded. Everyone knew the story. It had been front-page news for months. Vivian picked up the phone, her hands showing the wear of prison labor. "What right do you have?" Samuel slid the divorce papers against the glass. "I just need your signature. Unless you want to drag this out for another 5 years. She stared at him, searching for the man she once thought she could manipulate. Instead, she found the steel she had always mistaken for weakness. 5 years weren't enough. I lost everything. No, Samuel corrected. You gave everything away. There's a difference. In maximum security, Andre Jacobson was living under far worse conditions. His once glamorous real estate empire had collapsed spectacularly when the full extent of the FBI's investigation came to light. The probe uncovered over $50 million in fraudulent deals, affecting more than 100 families. Andre's designer suits had been replaced by a prison jumpsuit. His confident smile was long gone, erased by the reality of a 20-year sentence. His attempts to negotiate a reduced sentence failed when the FBI traced his involvement to international money laundering networks. Mr. Jacobson, the prison counselor said during a mandatory session, your appeal was denied again. Those were legitimate deals. Andre insisted, clinging to his delusions. The federal court disagrees. The evidence Mr. Stews provided was quite comprehensive. Andre's prison account showed small, regular deposits, from Celeste, his real wife of 15 years. She had been living in Europe, unaware of his numerous affairs and financial crimes until the FBI knocked on her door. She divorced him immediately, but guilt compelled her to send him small allowances for the commissary. Howard Stews served his time in minimum security. His lesser role in the scheme earned him a 5-year sentence that he wrote dozens of letters to Samuel. All returned unopened. His house, boat, and savings were seized to compensate the fraud victims. Released after 3 years for good behavior, Howard found himself living in a small apartment in another state, working as a grocery store clerk. His dating profile listed rebuilding family relationships as a goal. But Samuel's number remained blocked. Rich O'Brien served 7 years and paid a $2 million fine. His wife, Susan, divorced him immediately after his arrest. His children refused contact. His CPA license was permanently revoked. The beach house was auctioned off, the proceeds directed toward compensating victims. Judge Jennifer Brunan's downfall was the most spectacular. Disbarred and sentenced to 12 years for judicial corruption, she became a cautionary tale studied in law schools. Her judicial pension was revoked. Her reputation was ruined. Her wealthy husband divorced her. Her future after prison was bleak. Derek's path to redemption was difficult but transformative. He fulfilled every condition his father set, maintained a 3.9 GPA in college, worked part-time at a local engineering firm. Therapy sessions uncovered deep-seated issues about loyalty and integrity, ones he worked hard to address. Dad, Derek said during their weekly dinner, now a 5-year tradition. I got accepted into the master's program in structural engineering. Samuel looked up from his meal, his expression measured but filled with quiet pride. By your own merit. Completely. No shortcuts. No favors. Good, Samuel nodded. You've learned the most important lesson. The bridge that started it all became an award-winning project, featured in engineering journals. Samuel's innovations in stress distribution earned him patents, generating substantial royalties, but more importantly, the bridge stood as a testament to integrity, in construction and character. His firm, now rebranded as STUS Engineering, expanded its mission, not just construction, but fraud prevention consulting. His expertise had created an unexpected niche, helping companies identify and prevent internal fraud schemes like the one he had exposed. Another construction firm requesting audit protection, Julie Bro, now head of security operations, said, dropping a file on his desk. They heard about the Jacobson case. Samuel glanced at the report. Let's make sure they never have a Jacobson of their own. Samuel's personal life was also rebuilt on stronger foundations. He married Dr. Sarah Chan, a structural materials scientist he met at a conference. She understood his dedication to work, sharing his passion for building things that last. The irony, Sarah remarked one night, reviewing case files with him, is that Vivian never really understood what true security meant. She saw working double shifts as weakness, Samuel agreed. She never realized I was building something much bigger than a paycheck. Most of Andre's victims recovered, thanks to Samuel's meticulous documentation. The FBI's asset recovery team, led by Agent Martinez, traced and returned over $40 million to affected families. Mr. Stews, Martinez said during a joint seminar on fraud prevention, your case literally rewrote our real estate fraud investigation manual. Samuel's methodical approach exposed vulnerabilities in property transaction laws, leading to regulatory reforms. The STUS protocol became the standard procedure for investigating real estate fraud. Vivian's release date approached without fanfare. Prison reports noted minimal remorse, mostly regret for getting caught. Her attempt to write a tell-all book failed when publishers realized that Samuel's extensive documentation left no room for her to manipulate the story. Andre, still serving his longer sentence, had aged drastically. Prison fights left him with a permanent limp. His charm was useless in a place where everyone knew his crimes. The walls of his cell were covered in complex real estate schemes, ones he would never be able to execute. Howard, struggling in his new life, finally found purpose, coaching youth basketball at a community center. He had written one last letter to Samuel: I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve it. But watching these kids learn about teamwork and trust, I finally understand what I destroyed. Some foundations can be rebuilt. Samuel never opened the letter, but he kept it in his desk. Derek graduated with honors. His thesis on structural integrity in high-stress environments won academic awards. The irony was not lost on anyone that he started dating Maria, a law student specializing in corporate fraud prevention. Your son is nothing like how you described him 5 years ago, a colleague remarked. He needed to understand that integrity isn't just about following rules, Samuel replied. It's about building something worth preserving. The STUS protocol expanded beyond fraud prevention. Companies worldwide adopted its corporate governance principles, recognizing that structural integrity applied as much to organizations as it did to buildings. Samuel's new home, modest despite his success, reflected his unchanged values. In the basement, he kept boxes of evidence from the case, a reminder that, like engineering, justice required attention to detail and unshakable principles. Sarah had added her own touches, a lab for testing construction materials and a library filled with books on engineering and ethics. Their dinner conversations often mixed structural analysis with philosophical discussions on integrity. You never seem bitter, she observed one evening. After everything they did. Bitterness erodes the foundation, Samuel replied. I'd rather build. The National Engineering Association created the STUS Award for Ethical Innovation. The inscription read, for those who understand that the strongest structures are built on integrity. Vivian, Andre, and their accomplices had tried to tear down what Samuel had built. Instead, they had only proven his strength. Their plan, built on deception, collapsed under pressure. Samuel's life, founded on principle and precision, stood stronger than ever. Like the bridge that started it all, it was built to last. Story 2. My wife, a 27-year-old female, and I, a 29-year-old male, have been married for 3 years. We fell in love right away and had been virtually inseparable since our first date. We even worked at the same hospital. Spending so much time together was a dream come true. I thought she was the love of my life. Right before the pandemic, we had been trying for a baby. As luck would have it, it finally took. Due to her pregnancy and being high risk, she ended up having to leave her job at the hospital. I'm a doctor, and those first few months of the pandemic were some of the most difficult of my life because of how much I was exposed to the virus. We figured it would be safest for her and the baby if I rented an apartment until things got better. I was there for her every step of the way virtually, but I was devastated I couldn't be there physically. She had her sister with her, though, and they assured me she was being well taken care of. Fast forward 5 months, after explaining my position, I took a leave of absence from work and moved back in. The baby was coming due soon, and I couldn't miss the first few months of his life. There was a lot of distance between us at first, but we fell back into our usual habits quickly. While we were apart, she had taken a remote job that she continued working. Even after the baby was born and things began improving, she was home quite often. So, it was our neighbor. ID always had a bad feeling about the guy. He was married and had children of his own. He was always offering to stop by and check in on my wife. I always tried to brush it off as him just being a small-town nosy neighbor. During the pandemic and the pregnancy, my sister-in-law came to live with us to help out, and she ended up staying a bit longer after things started improving. I also went back to working in the ER, since that has always been my professional desire. That I don't recall when it all started, but they both started hanging out with my neighbor quite frequently. They went to the park with the kids together, they'd take them to kids' movies together, and had often invite them over for barbecues on the weekends. But all of this was usually when I was on call, so I was never there. It started to feel like I was missing out on my own life, and my neighbor had stepped into my spot. One day, I got sick at work and had to come home early. I got back to my house around 6 p.m., and when I walked in, my sister-in-law was sitting on the couch with my baby and the neighbor's kid. That struck me as a little odd, but it wasn't unusual for her to offer to babysit. I asked where my wife was, and she got quiet and then switched the questioning back to asking why I was home so early. Her car was still in the driveway, so I knew she hadn't gone anywhere. That I looked for her all over my house and still didn't see her. I realized that if the neighbor's kid was there, then there was a chance he might know where she was. Part of me thought she might be with him, but I didn't want to believe that at the time. I walked over to his house and rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. He usually kept his car in the garage, so I couldn't tell if he was home or not without peeking inside, and I didn't want other neighbors to think I was a creep, so I didn't. When I walked back inside, my sister-in-law was on the phone whispering to someone. As soon as she saw me, she quickly hung up. I didn't ask her who it was because I had a strong enough suspicion it was my wife, and part of me didn't want the confirmation just yet. My wife came home about 20 minutes later in a nice dress that I bought her for her birthday, carrying some fast food chicken with her. She tried to convince me that she had just gone out to get some chicken for dinner with the neighbor, but I didn't believe her. Why would she have needed to get all dressed up with a full face of makeup for a drive-through? I knew she was lying to me, but I couldn't prove it just yet. I didn't want to blow up on her in front of the children in the house either, so I hired a PI to watch the house for a few days and see what they came up with. It didn't take long for them to report back with evidence of her cheating. The PI was stationed outside of our house and brought me photos and videos of my neighbor bringing his kid over for my sister-in-law to watch while my wife spent time with him in his house. He had a few photos of them kissing in various states of undress too. That was enough evidence for me to proceed to file for divorce. I still had the lease on the apartment I had rented during the pandemic, so I planned to move in there. I didn't want to continue living in the house my wife was likely cheating on me in. Over time, I moved enough stuff over there so that when I served her the papers, I could just go there. Now, we lived in a small town, and the neighborhood was pretty close-knit. I didn't want to just leave the both of them there to live happily ever after. So, during Memorial Day weekend, I hosted a huge blowout cookout and invited everyone to join us. I rented a bounce house for the kids, bought fireworks, and manned the grill all day. Right before it came time to light the fireworks, I gathered all of the adults in the area and then shared the evidence with them. My wife and neighbor didn't know this right away, but when everyone started whispering and looking at them, they started to suspect something was wrong. When my wife finally came to talk to me, she tried to explain that it wasn't what it looked like, and she didn't know how those pictures were made. I ignored her and told her I was filing for divorce. Then I went to watch the fireworks with my son, while she scrambled trying to figure out a way to save the life ID given her. Turns out her sister was very involved in the affair. I can't say for certain, but it almost seems like she encouraged it. I tried not to talk to my wife during the divorce proceedings, but from what she explained, she thought I was too absent during the pregnancy, and after that she sought comfort with our neighbor. But she failed to mention how I sacrificed being with her for her and her child's health because I had so much exposure at work that my neighbor had no plans to leave his wife for her either. He cut contact off with my wife completely and moved away because of how ostracized he felt by the neighbors. He threatened to sue me for sharing the evidence, but I don't think the courts will be too pleased to hear about how he left his daughter with my ex-sister-in-law just to cheat on his wife. That I have shared custody of my son with my ex now. My ex and I still live near each other and are doing our best to co-parent and make sure our son still has a happy, loving family. The story is undoubtedly full of complex emotions and difficult decisions. I sympathize with the author, who has faced infidelity in their marriage, and I understand their desire for a divorce. Organizing a grand celebration to expose the infidelity may seem like a drastic step, but people react differently to painful situations. It is important for the author and their family to find ways to cope with this experience and move forward, ensuring care and well-being for everyone involved.